I'm attempting to complete every single GameCube game, and I'm using a random number generator to pick the next game. Last episode, we got behind the wheel of a NASCAR and played NASCAR Thunder 2003, and in this episode, we're unlocking the Wings of Our Heart and playing Baten Kaitos Origins. Baten Kaitos Origins was released on September 25th, 2006, and was developed by Monolith Soft and published by Nintendo. This is our next game that will be broken up into parts, so this won't be the whole game in this video. Before we get started, make sure to like this video because it helps out the channel, and subscribe if you're new so you don't miss any of the future games. Without further ado, this is my experience with Baten Kaitos Origins. In Baten Kaitos Origins, we're going to go through the story mode to consider this one complete. But before we get to that menu, we have a really good opening cutscene before we get to the main title screen. This is also the opening cutscene of the game as well, but I like that this game grabs you from the start. It shows some sort of war between what looks like humans and angels, and has a really nice paint look to it. Once we start the game, we get to name ourselves, so I decided I was going to name my character Rise because I was streaming this over on Twitch, and wanted to match the name of my channel. If you're not already, make sure to check out my Twitch channel and come hang out while I play these games live. As I mentioned before, we get the same opening cutscene when we enter the game, but this time we find out that it was all some sort of a dream because our character wakes up in bed. At least I thought this was the character I was naming at the beginning, but I guess it wasn't. This is the main character of the game and the one we'll be playing as. His name is Soggy and he is a spiriter, which is extremely rare in the world that we're in, so it makes him sort of special. This is when we find out that he has a voice that talks to him from his heart. It seems weird, but it's sort of explained later in the game. This is what is referred to as the heart of the spiriter, and that's who we were naming at the beginning of the game. Even though when this scene started, I thought Soggy was talking to the man sleeping in the bed next to us, and that was my character, but I guess not. I know that sounds kind of stupid, but without any context, that's what I thought was happening. Anyways, after Soggy talks to us a bit, a soldier comes in our room and tells us we have to go to the strategy room for a very urgent meeting, and that we need to hurry up. So naturally, I looked around the entire headquarters before heading to the strategy room. Yikes, my bad, Captain. Around the headquarters and the world, there will be these green chests that we can open that will give us new cards to add to our deck, helping us become stronger and have better combos. This all sounds confusing, but I will explain it more when we get to our first battle. But for now, knowing that we find these cards around the world is most important. The headquarters we're in is called the Dark Service Headquarters, which is a section of the military for the country that we're currently helping. We enrolled in the Dark Service for reasons, but I will reveal them later on. Scattered around the world are these orange plants and blue plants, which is how you save the game. The blue one allows us to travel to some other areas that we can't get to otherwise, but for right now, they're only used for saving the game. Now, let's head into the strategy room and find out what was so urgent. When we arrive in the room, we get told we're late and that we need to hurry up and take our position, which seems pretty relaxed for being late in the military, but we get off without much punishment here. The captain then explains that we have a very important mission coming up, that we're assigned to assassinate Emperor Ogden, which is very surprising to everyone in the room. But the captain just continues on telling the plan to everyone. We're going to use what they call paramachina to help take down the forces protecting the Emperor and go in and take him out. We don't get much more after that, but just know that Soggy is vocally not happy about the whole situation, which some of the other soldiers overhear. This will become important very soon. After the meeting is over, we meet a soldier at the exit of the strategy room that gives us 8 blank magnets. These are really cool, and I love how they're used in the game. The blank magnets, which will let us take the essence of objects and turn them into cards, and then we can use those cards to help us solve problems for people in the world. Help with the environment, such as carrying water around or fire. What we carry will change based on what we're doing and what we need to solve the puzzles. The first thing we have to do is collect some water and put out a fire in the strategy room that randomly breaks out. This is basically the tutorial for using magnets, and I really like how they're used in the game. After helping out, we get another card for our deck, and then we're given the magnet essence of a travel log. This will let us keep track of quests and side quests that we have open and ones that we have completed. I think I ended up carrying this thing the whole game. Finally, we can leave the strategy room to head down to get our Paramachina puppet thing so we can get ready for the mission. But when we come outside, this woman stops us and warns us about talking out against the orders of the captain. Remember, I told you this was important because they didn't take kindly to this. So she tells us to stay on the down low and not talk out of turn. But it's too late and 3 soldiers come out and they challenge us to a fight. They basically insult us for a while and tell us that we need to learn our place and that they don't need snot-nosed punks in their ranks. And then we get into our first combat in the game. This is going to be a lot of information all at once, and I will try my best to make it all make sense. When we go into a battle, we use the deck that is equipped, and it's filled with cards that we can use during the battle. So collecting cards is a good idea. We can start the game by holding up to 40 cards on our deck. When the fight starts, random cards will show up in our hand that we can use. If there are things we can't use or don't want to use, we can discard them. The more we level up, the more cards we can discard in a turn. Anyways, now that we know how it works, on each turn our character can pick cards to play. There are cards that can have healing effects such as restoring health or reviving an ally. Some cards will provide offensive buffs or defensive buffs depending on what they are. Using weapons increase offensive stats, and armor and helmets increase defensive stats. Then we have attacking cards. These start at the lowest form as a basic attack 1. This will do the base damage of our character and nothing else. And then these go all the way up to 3 and get stronger when we increase them. The idea is to make combos so that we can do more damage quickly. So we can stack up to 7 cards with the right numbers on them, and if we have enough MP, we have cards that can increase our MP, or taking damage and attacking normally will increase our MP meter. Once we get over 3, we get the special attacks that can cause more damage, and even have elements attached to them. I think that covers the basics of the combat system, and I'll mention stuff in the future if anything new takes place. But for the most part in this game, I'm only going to show combat for boss fights, because there are a lot of fights when exploring the world and going through the story. So this is the basic idea for combat, and in this fight I was horrible because I didn't understand it yet. It explains battling after this first fight, which seems to be a bit harsh to the player. We were able to win this fight, but it wasn't easy. Another note that I think is important is that we don't have to use healing items after the fights, we just go back to full health for each fight. So basically if we get through the fight, then we're good. At the end of every battle, we get a screen showing us XP gained, TP, which is used for upgrading the deck, gold for buying cards from the shop and upgrading them, time for how long the battle took, max damage, which is the most damage done in one turn, and max hit, which is the biggest combo in the way of attacks. And this will even show us if we find new cards from fighting enemies, and if anyone levels up. After the fight, we won, but the soldiers still want to fight us, but the captain comes out and tells them to get lost, and tells us we have guts or something. It's not really important. We finally make it down to the armory, and we can get our Paramachina. These things look like puppets, and that's basically what they are. They all look the same, and they can't talk. But when we get ours, it looks completely different, and has the ability to talk. And not only can it talk, but it has 2 voices that talk at the exact same time. It's really interesting, and it's something that took me a little bit to get used to. But our Paramachina is fully aware and is named Gilo. Gilo is an amazing character and really kept me on the edge with its backstory. This is the first party member that will join us on our adventure, but at first Gilo tells us not to worry about them in battle and to focus on ourselves. So we don't have to use both characters yet. After getting Gilo out of these chamber things and telling it not to talk, we're ready to make our way out of the headquarters so we can complete our mission. But at first I decided to add some of the cards we had found in the headquarters to our deck, and sure enough the soldiers decide to attack us again, but this time we have Gilo to help even out the odds for us. And Gilo is an absolute powerhouse. Gilo uses blades on their forearms, or at least that's what it looks like, and some of the weapons we can use in our cards are Wolverine claws, so I'm not sure what Gilo uses, their fist maybe? Either way, Gilo can take down enemies with ease and has a higher base attack stat than Soggy. We take on these soldiers in this fight, and we have no issue with this fight at all. I also knew how to stack combos a bit better in this fight, which made it easier overall. After we win, we get a low potion card and can finally move out of the first area of the game. But not before we go around the area and use our magnets to relight all the candles that went out. I know this isn't really important to the plot, but I wanted to show at least one of the side quests because that's when we're going to use our magnets most, and we earned a Magnus Pack coupon, which we can use at the shops to get some cards to help build up our deck. These are lying around the world, but most of the time we have to interact with random items and aren't in chests. Once we get outside of the headquarters, we get another breakdown of the mission, and the captain tells us that we're in charge of the team that will actually go in and assassinate Emperor Ogden. But we can't just go through the front gates. We have to find another path to get into this mansion. Soggy tries to get his soldiers pumped up, but does a horrible job as a leader, and Gilo points this out. Gilo has no filter, and I absolutely love it. We find a back way into the mansion, but there are 2 guards waiting at the door, so we have no choice but to fight them. The fight is easy, but I wanted to point out that we gained a level after this fight for Soggy. It doesn't usually take long to level up in the area we're in, but later in the game, leveling up takes forever sometimes. Once inside the mansion, there is a massive fountain in the middle of the lobby, and everything is golden. It's because it takes place in an area that only uses Machina, and everything is metal or robotic. It's an odd choice, really, but everything is golden and metal. After exploring this front area for a minute, we come into a room where soldiers are bullying this repairman for some reason. I don't really know what the deal is, but we take them out and get the key to Ogden's residence. This is a great find for us. We throw some water on the repairman to wake him up after he's been knocked out from the soldiers. See, I told you that this Magnus is a fun part of this game. He tells us that he was sent there to check on the crest wall, which is blocking our way further into the mansion, and we need to find a way to get this crest wall to shut down so we can get to the Emperor. So since we helped out the repairman, he tells us that for a chunk of rubber that he would turn the crest wall off for a little while. So we're like, that works, and we bring him some rubber. This is such a strange request. He shuts down the crest wall and we run into a new enemy. It's a robot thing that doesn't really do much, but I thought it was a bit interesting. After clearing out the enemies in the area, we're about to head into the Emperor's room when we hear someone talking on the other side. So we decide to wait and just see what we can hear from the outside of the door. After not hearing much going on, we decide that our only option is to bust into the room and see what's happening. Once we get inside the room, we see a strange man standing by the Emperor, and he tells us that he needs to grab this list of afterlings and then proceeds to leave. We decide that for now we have to let him go and we need to focus on our mission. So we go over to the Emperor, ready to kill him, and we find out that he is already dead. And Soggy assumes that the man that just left did it. But right at that moment, spotlights appear on us, and the captain of the Dark Service comes in and tells us that we're all in trouble because we're traitors for assassinating the Emperor, even though we were given that mission. It was actually a trap, and the real goal was to frame us for murder. It seems pretty out of the blue, but we're in a bad place. The captain tells his men to open fire on us, and they take out the Paramachina with us, until Gilo jumps in and tells Soggy to get out of the room. I like that Soggy asked us what we think we should do, and I was like, I can take him. So I told him to fight, but Soggy's like, if we fight, we'll die. So we have to get out of here. I like that we're given that option, but sad that it doesn't actually change anything. So we run out of the side of the room with the 2 remaining soldiers with us, and are now on the run from the Dark Service. What a change of events so early in the game. We got framed for a murder. Anyways, we run out in the hallway and this giant creature appears. This thing looks like something that you would see in your nightmares. It breaks through the wall of the hallway and grabs the last 2 soldiers we have left and smashes them on the ground. What a brutal end for them. I think I would have rather been taken out by the soldiers than smashed by this beast. This leads us into our very first boss fight of the game. This fight isn't that bad because Gilo is still fighting without us controlling their attacks, meaning they'll attack with the best possible combo, and I was finally learning how to stack combos and do massive damage. So this boss fight is actually a really easy one. It's a lot of chaining combos, and then healing to make sure we don't die. Once we do enough damage to the creature does this massive attack, taking both Soggy and Gilo down. The attack looks like he threw rocks at us or something with magic. I don't really know, but I like that we can't kill the first boss. We just do enough damage to make it angry. Valera, the girl from headquarters, shows up and basically mocks us about it being the end of the road. Gilo then goes Super Saiyan with blue electric coming off them and runs up to the creature and starts going ham on the thing, just basically punching it in the head. While all this is going on, Soggy starts having really bad pain in his head and proceeds to tell Gilo to stop attacking, but Gilo just keeps going and puts all that electric power into one hand and stabs the creature in the head, which this causes Soggy to pass out from the pain. The screen fades to black and we get a bunch of XP for this fight, and both Soggy and Gilo level up, and we get this really good Flame Sword card for Soggy, which I used for a while after this. When Soggy wakes up from passing out, we wake up in a completely different area with completely different people around. They talk to us like we have been friends for a long time, but we have no idea who they are. But since we have no idea what is going on or where we are, we decide that we're going to go with them for now because it's our best option. We find out that the guy with the red hair is named Thorin, and he thinks we're joking when we ask him if we've ever met before. When we move to the next area, we find out that we're in a place called the Albali Sand Hollow, and there are waterfalls of sand falling from rocks. The area looks really neat, but it's just a bunch of rocks and enemies. In this area, we're able to fly up to certain spots and jump down, so it adds a vertical scale to the area, which is a nice way to change up all the metal areas that we've been in since the beginning of the game. Using our magnets, we can take the magnetic waves from these glowing red spots and create our own bridges to get further into the area and gain access to chests for new cards. I like that the first time we take the waves, the bridge that we're standing on gives out and we fall down to the layer below us. And then we have to work our way all the way back to the top. I really like the way the dungeon areas look and work in this game. We create some new bridges along the way and are able to get this chest that contains flame mail, a very good set of armor during this stage of the game. I don't end up using armor too much in my deck until late in the game, but it's something that will make the battles in this game much easier. Once we get through this area, we meet up with the rest of Thorin's party, and they tell us that the village was already attacked, and we were too late. They just refer to this as erasing the villagers, and don't really go too much further into it at this point in the game. It seems to be something that happens often, and this party of people are trying their best to prevent it from happening. The group decides they should head down to the village and see if there is anyone that wasn't affected from the erasing. This village is called Rosala's Village of Fire Moss, and it looks really interesting. It reminds me of a jellyfish, or like it should be underwater. If this was a real place, I think I would live here because it's a small village that looks really neat. I think it would be a nice peaceful place to spend time. The group splits up and we can take this time to search around the village and talk to people. But this is when everything gets super weird. The people here are like ghosts. They have no physical form and none of them seem to know that they're not normal people anymore. And they just continue doing everyday tasks. It's a bit sad to be honest because it seems like they're all very confused. We come across our very first blue flower in this village and we can teleport to the endmost Bethel, which is a church that has one person inside of it, a priest. He can upgrade our class level using the TP we collect from winning battles throughout the game. The upgrades can help us have more cards in our deck, the amount of different decks we can build, and how many cards we can discard in one turn. The priest can help us with purchasing and equipping auras, but since we don't have the items to do this yet, I'll wait until later to explain this part. Upgrading our class level will become super helpful later in the game when trying to string together massive combo attacks. We're able to upgrade our deck 3 times during this visit, which allows for us to have 3 different decks with 50 cards in each of them, and we can discard 2 cards per turn now. After upgrading our decks, we head back to the village. When we go to leave the village, Soggy is talking about how strange the feelings he's having in this village are, and then his head begins to hurt again, and Soggy passes out for the second time. We get a flashback of everything that has happened up to this point in the game, and then appear in the hallway from before with Gilo checking on us. Gilo tells us that we have to get up and go because we're still in the Emperor's residence, and we have to escape. As all this is going on, Valara shows up and we have to run before they're able to capture us. Valara doesn't seem to really care about what we're doing at this moment, and is more focused on getting the monster back to wherever they need to take it. Valara calls the monster an afterling, which is the thing that the man in the room with the Emperor took the list of. Is it all connected in some way? When it comes back to Soggy and Gilo, a man peeks out of a room and tells us to follow him. This seems sketchy, but we really don't have a choice, so we decide that following him could be our only way out of the mansion. He tells us about an underground passage through the sewers that will take us out to the streets of Mintaka, and basically just tells us that we should hang out down there until some of the heat is taken off of us. And then we can go into the city. We question who he is, and he tells us that his name is Gildablame, and that he serves Quaestor Varus, the head of the military and a fellow spiritor. We collect some chests before we head down into the sewers, getting a new card that allows us to revive fallen party members during fights. This is a very helpful card. We're finally ready to jump down into the sewers, so we open the hatch and jump down and then run through some nasty poop water. Once we get to the end of the sewer, we find a ladder that takes us up to the city, and we enter the wonderful golden city of Mintaka, or at least a part of it. It all runs by machines and it's all gold. Mintaka loves the sight of gold or something. Just because it's all machines and metal doesn't mean everything has to be gold. Come on now, where's the silver? Or just paint over it or something. We realize that we took too long and it's daytime now, which is going to make getting out of the city much more difficult. And Soggy makes the decision that they're going to head to the port and take a Skyliner to Haslam, which we find out is their home. Gilo doesn't seem extremely stoked about this idea, but that's the plan for now. The city we need to get to in Haslam is Shuratan, where Soggy grew up. Now we get to explore the city and get attacked by soldiers at every single turn, but we are finally able to use Gilo in battle. So now we can create our attacks for both Soggy and Gilo in the battle instead of just Soggy. I could see this adding a level of difficulty to the combat, but I really enjoyed that I could set up two characters instead of just one. After getting lost in the city for way too long and fighting way too many soldiers, I was able to find the way we needed to go. As we're leaving, we get cut off by a ton of enemy soldiers trying to take us down, but honestly at this point they were no problem at all. We took them down without even breaking a sweat. This is a multi-enemy fight, and we have to fight so many soldiers that I decided that I was going to speed up the footage until we got through it. After 3 separate fights, we're greeted with a cutscene that has a brand new character show up that actually comes in and takes down a bunch of the soldiers for us. It's a girl that has butterfly wings and looks like she's carrying maracas. I guess they're maracas. I don't really know what those are. But we haven't seen her at any point in this game so far, so we have no idea who she is. Once she takes out these soldiers, Soggy tries to find out who she is, but we're attacked by more soldiers and thrown into another battle, where she helps, but we can't control her attacks. This fight is super easy because we now have a third person attacking the enemies for us. Once we defeat them, we get another cutscene, and a young man shows up with blonde hair. He seems to be in control of the unit, or at least some sort of commander. He's carrying around this pretty cool battle axe thing, and it 100% wants to fight us. Yet again, we have no idea who this is, but he seems to know who we are. We find out that his name is Giacomo, and we get into another boss fight, but this one doesn't go very well at first. I thought I was safe because I had been wiping the floor with the soldiers, but Giacomo is no pushover and has some attacks that are very strong. I also want to point out that the boss fight music during this is really good. It has no business being this good. There isn't much of a strategy in this fight besides attack often and try to stay as healthy as possible throughout the fight. If a party member goes down, we have to get them revived as soon as we can. In the first, second, and third attempts, he takes us down pretty easily and doesn't seem to care too much about what the girl is doing, because if she's still alive and both Soggy and Gilo are down, then we lose the fight. One of the things that I really like about this game is that during boss fights, if we die, we don't have to go all the way back to our last save and do all the things leading up to it. We can just jump back into the fight. But if you die on a normal enemy, then you do. I think that they were aware that the boss fights jump in difficulty, and someone might need a few attempts to figure out the best way to take them down. So I really do appreciate that. I didn't really know how to approach boss fights in this game, so I decided to just show the whole fight, but speed it up. This fight is pretty basic, as I mentioned before. So this time, I just made sure that we stayed healthy in the fight and just made one large combo at a time. We are able to finally take him out, but he just sort of leaves limping, so I don't think this is going to be the last time we see him. He tells us that he'd be back to settle the score with us in the future. After the fight, we level up, and then we finally find out who this girl is that has been helping us. This is our third playable character. Her name is Milliard, and she wants to go by Millie for short. She doesn't go much more into detail and tells Soggy and Gilo that she helped us because she couldn't just watch people that were going to lose. I don't think we were going to, but okay, I guess. Millie is more of a healing character when it comes to stats, but I find myself using her for attacks because she gets special cards that can make her have combos that are super long and do a ton of damage. She clashes with Gilo a lot, and they go back and forth all the time about what to do or where to go, and even just moral decisions. We'll learn more about her in the future, but this is what we learned from this interaction and a bit into the future. After all those distractions, we finally get to the Skyliner and are able to leave, but Gilo isn't happy that Millie decides to come along with us back to Haslam. But Soggy tells Gilo it's fine and not to worry. Then the Skyliner takes off and we head to a different island in the sky. After the cutscene shows us leaving the island, we get a cutscene showing Shanath, the man from the beginning of the game, talking to Lord Balhalt, and they talk about the Emperor being dead and that the Emperor was already dead before we got there. Nothing really new other than we find out some sort of operation that was considered a failure, but Shanath convinces him that everything is fine, and Balhalt sends him to find out how the boy escaped, which he's talking about Soggy at this moment. They talk about starting their plan earlier than expected and that they need to head to different places, but I don't want to talk about them until we actually get there. After their exchange, it comes back to Soggy and friends as they land in Haslam. Soggy and Gilo talk outside of the Skyliner again, and that Gilo is worried about Millie being there. And Soggy says that he feels like she's helpless, and Gilo responds with, she could have a ton of bricks land on her, and the bricks would be helpless. I don't really know what that means, but it made me laugh. Once we leave the area with the Skyliner, we can head further into the island, and we get our first look at the map that allows for us to run around an island and stop in different places without going through every single area over and over again. This is a nice way to not force you to go through some really long areas, and I like that. Before we get to Sheraton, we have to go through the Nusakan Thornwood, which is a wooded area with a bunch of thorns on everything. It seems a bit dangerous, but I really like the way it looks. There's also a monster here that can be popped by the thorns if it runs into them. I don't know why it would live in a place like this, but it's a neat little detail. Soggy finally introduces himself to Millie after all that time together. He's such a good leader. Later in this area, Millie joins our team, so we can now control 3 characters in battle at once. And this is when the game becomes more fun or difficult, depending on your thoughts about it. I personally found it way more fun. Right before we leave the area, we come across this massive crater in the woods, and we find out that Soggy actually dug out Gilo, because Gilo was buried there at some point, but has no memory of how they got there, so that's a mystery that we hopefully find out later in the game. Once we get through the Thornwoods, we finally arrive in Sheraton, the ageless village. This village is Soggy's hometown, and is very different from Mintaka. The village is old and everything is made out of bricks, and the greenery has began to grow back over everything. I really like the way this looks because it's so much different than anything we've seen up to this point. We watch a woman by the name of Gina comfort a child when we arrive by showing the child her wings. It's a really good scene, and her wings look really good for the time period of gaming. Then Soggy mentions that Gina is his mom, which I would have gathered anyways because she looks a lot like him. She even has blue hair just like Soggy does. After the cutscene, we're supposed to go visit her, but I made a quick pit stop and grabbed the field guide so we could document all the enemies we fight along the way, and come back to get items from this man. I think this is a good reason to actually go around and fight all the different enemies in the game. We also grab a Magnum mix recipe from the clock tower building, and then we get the scene where Soggy goes to the orphanage and just says, "Hi mom, I'm home." This has such an impact at the moment. I really like that he's almost like he's afraid to be there, but she embraces him in a big hug and tells him welcome home, so he has no reason to be scared to approach her. I don't know why, but I really like this scene in the game. We get some dialogue about the old clock tower and how the kids in the village would dare each other to climb to the top of it. Gilo talks about how Soggy used to spend a lot of time up there as a kid, and Gina would get so worried about him. And then it goes into another scene where we're having dinner with everyone, and then it's nighttime. Which seems more like a transition for us to get woken up in the morning, but I digress. We find out that people have been going down to the lake and disappearing, so we decide to check it out to see if we can find any clues. The lake is called Lake Baten Kaitos, which I would assume isn't the whole lake, but just a portion of it. We come down there and find some mixing magnets, and decide to take it back to the girl that was asking about it before we came down here. This area is neat and has a lily that lets us gain oxygen from it when we're underwater. It's a kind of neat property that this flower has. We head back to the village after this and talk to the elder's granddaughter that tells us that we can keep the mixing magnets, which means that we can take items and mix them together to make different items. Not all items can mix, and some have to mix a bunch of times to get to the final product, but it's a really cool thing to add. Most things that we need to mix are for side quests in the game, and nothing in the main quest really makes you mix stuff up. That night, we overhear a girl talking behind the clock tower that ends up being Millie. She's talking about Soggy to someone on the phone, and is asking if the person is sure about him, and then Soggy walks outside, so the conversation ends pretty fast. Soggy asks us what our thoughts are on Millie, and then she comes out from behind the clock tower. Soggy and Millie have a conversation about how they couldn't sleep, and that they both had a million thoughts going on in their head. Nothing else really happens here, but it's starting to form some sort of bond between those two. The next morning starts with two kids from the orphanage running inside, talking about how they seen a monster down at the lake, and it was huge. We tell the kids that we can go check it out, and then Soggy talks about how he wants to know more since both him and Gilo started acting weird the last time they encountered a monster like that. Then we just have to prepare before we head back to the lake. After doing a few side quests, we head down to the lake again. When we arrive at the lake, you can see the shadow of something swimming in the water, but we're going to have to figure out how to get to it. Soggy has a minor headache, and then we're able to jump on pillars to head to the other side of this area, into these two rooms that have bottom rooms that are filled with water. If you remember, I mentioned the lilies that let us breathe underwater for longer, so we have to get a few of them, and then in the basement of each room, we have to push this wall with all the emblems on it until it locks in place. We start by doing the one on the left side of the area, which has a man sitting on a box, being able to breathe just fine, I guess. I wish I had the lungs this man has, but he can literally hold his breath forever. Anyways, once we push it into place, it lights up and we can head over to the other side and do the same thing in the basement of the right side. This part took me a little bit to figure out because I didn't know we could push the wall in the back, because it kind of just seems like a background for the area. But I was able to figure it out, and once the second wall was set in place, it lights up and the water gets flushed like it's some sort of giant toilet or something, and we don't have to worry about holding our breath underwater anymore. Somehow, though, this makes a bridge form outside, and a statue comes from the bottom of the runes to the top of the runes. I don't know how this works, but I'm just going to let this one go. Once we drain the water, there are a bunch of people lying around that we're going to have to wake up by using different magnets, but we'll do that in a bit. It's time for another boss fight. That statue in the middle that comes up is actually an elevator, and it takes us down to the bottom of the runes. When we get to the bottom, we find two people laying there. They're both alive, and one is the village elder. After checking on them, we get attacked by another monster like the one before. But this one is a different color, and it looks more like a sea creature with fins. I think it's neat that each one of these so far are a bit different from each other, and they will attack accordingly as well. This fight is not a hard one. It uses water attacks on us. We have to just stay healed up, and just work it down until we do enough damage to trigger its final attack. Most of the main bosses so far don't have us doing a bunch of damage, and it's just us working down the health enough to trigger the boss's big attack. We get another scene after the fight, and yet Gilo freaks out and attacks it with electric arm blades, and is able to take it down. Gilo doesn't kill it, but it seems more like it's knocked out. We get a bunch of experience from this fight, and all three characters level up from it. Millie gives Gilo grief about fighting the beast, but Gilo seems like they're in some sort of trance or something. But this time, Soggy doesn't get the headache like before. and tell Gilos that they're acting weird and says you don't remember anything this time either. But Gilo says they remember everything this time and thinks their purpose for living is to kill these creatures. We wake up the Elder and he asks us to save everyone in the area. There are 5 people total that we need to save, and we get a potion card that will restore more health when we use it. This is nice because the low potion that we've been using just doesn't do much. When we get back to the village, we're met with Valara at the entrance in some sort of mech thing. It looks a bit like a scorpion if it could stand on 2 legs and was made out of metal. Valara tells us that we should have kept a low profile, but now that we're here, what are we going to do in the spotlight? And then we have to fight her in her new mech. We don't do any damage to this thing, and it hits really hard. So again, this is another fight of doing as much damage as we can, but just keeping the party alive is the main goal. After a long fight with a bunch of healing, we do enough damage to trigger the final attack, where Valara shoots a huge blue laser out of the tail of the mech, and it hits all of us, taking us down. It's a cool attack, but I think it would have killed us. We find out it's called Machina Arma, and it is a special weapon that is being made, but is still a prototype. We think it's all over for us when the Afterling that we just fought at the lake jumps in and attacks Valara. It saved us for now. We got a bunch of experience for this fight, even though we didn't actually kill anything or really do any damage. But I'm not complaining. Once we come back into the overworld, it shows the Afterling and Valara fighting, and the Afterling is actually getting the best of her, causing some good damage to the Machina Arma, and it seems like it's going to take it out, but Valara uses the tail laser on the Afterling, and this beam is so strong it cuts a portion of the island clean off. So I think if this laser touched us in a fight, we would be dead. I don't think I'm wrong here. The only thing I can think of is that she wasn't using it at that high of a setting, since we couldn't do any damage to it anyways. She was like toying with us because she seems like that type of person. Since she hit the Afterling with that attack, Soggy has this massive headache bulldoze its way back into his head, and then we pass out. When we come back to, we're back in the village with Thorin and everyone. But this time Gilo and Millie are with us. I don't know how this really works, but they're here with us and they can battle with us if we need them. Thorin and everyone is checking on us, but they call us Marno, which we have no idea who that is because our name is Soggy, so this is another mystery. Who's Marno? Where are we? Who are these people? And who is causing these villagers to disappear like this? This game is great at creating questions early on and not answering them until late in the game. So remember things as we go on. Once we awake and Millie tries to interact with them without success, they tell us that we should head back to Naus for now. I don't know what that is, but that's where we're going to head. Soggy mentions that it's more to the dream that he's had back in the mansion, and Millie is like, you're telling me we're having the same dream at the same time? Which I was thinking the same thing. We decide to follow them again and just see what happens from here. That's where I'm going to end this part because we're going to do a bunch of stuff after this, and I want to start fresh in part 2. I would like to know what your thoughts are so far on the game. Have you played this game before? Let me know down in the comments below. But until the next part, thanks for watching, and remember to subscribe, like, and share this video, and we'll see you in the next one.